Is this some kind of joke? The voice cut through the static of police radios and distant sirens, sharp with the condescension of youth. Rookie Officer Miller stood rigid, his crisp blue uniform a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around the downtown bank. He blocked the path to the command vehicle, his arms crossed over his chest protector. Before him stood Eli Vance, a man whose face was a roadmap of a life lived long and hard, hands tucked into the pockets of a worn leather jacket that had seen more seasons than Miller had years. The quiet man just watched, his eyes not on the rookie's challenging stare, but on the bank's facade. He didn't just see brick and mortar, he saw the stress fractures beneath the surface, the hollow spaces where the concrete should be, and the precise trajectory of disaster, as if listening to the building's final confession. The tension was immediate, palpable, youthful arrogance meeting quiet, unassumed authority head-on at the perimeter tape. The downtown branch of First Mercantile was sealed tighter than a tomb. 3 gunmen inside, armed and agitated, 8 hostages, including 2 children. Negotiations had stalled an hour ago, the phone line going dead after a terse, angry exchange. Chief of Police Maria Ramirez stood at the heart of the mobile command post, her face a mask of controlled stress, eyes fixed on the bank's thermal imaging feed. The glowing red and orange blobs on the screen were people, lives reduced to heat signatures. Officer Miller was in his element here, surrounded by technology. He relayed comms chatter, pointed at the thermal display, and advocated for the textbook play. Wait for SWAT, maintain the perimeter, let the sensors do the work. It was all procedure, all by the book. Eli Vance moved differently. He didn't look at the screens, he stood slightly apart, his head tilted. He watched the way a faint breeze teased a discarded newspaper against the curb. He studied the architecture of the old bank building, his gaze tracing the lines of the brickwork, the placement of the windows, the heavy marble lintel over the main entrance. He listened to the sounds the microphones couldn't pick up, the faint creak of floorboards from within, the shift in the tone of a hostage's muffled sob. His first words to anyone were not a suggestion, but a quiet observation spoken to no one in particular. The weight is wrong on the southeast corner is a secured area. His voice was loud enough to draw glances from other officers. Eli didn't move. The service tunnel, he said quietly, his finger hovering over a line on the map. The old coal chute access. It doesn't show the updated schematics. It comes up into the basement vault. It's how they're getting air, why your thermal is showing a cold spot. Miller scoffed. Updated schematics are in the system. And who are you? You have no badge, no official ID. This is a police operation, not a town hall meeting. He looked to the chief for backup. We can't have civilians inserting wild theories based on gut feelings. Eli finally turned his full attention to Miller. His eyes were the color of weathered stone, and they held no anger, only a profound, weary patience. The system is wrong, he said, his voice low and even. The city never filed the 58 retrofit plans after the flood. The hard copies are in the basement archive. I know because I was on the crew that poured the new foundation. Miller flushed, his professional pride wounded in front of his chief. That's irrelevant. We operate on verified intelligence, not construction stories from 50 years ago. Chief Ramirez watched the exchange, her gaze flicking between the arrogant rookie and the impossibly calm old man. She was a woman of procedure herself, but she also trusted her gut. And her gut was telling her this wasn't just some random bystander. Eli's response wasn't directed at Miller's argument about protocol. It cut straight through it, aimed at the man beneath the uniform. His voice didn't rise, but it gained a density that made the air around them feel heavy. How many lives is your pride worth, son? The question hung there, simple, devastating, stripping away the rulebook and the rank and leaving only the raw calculus of life and death in the humid afternoon air. The world dissolved. The humid air of the command post vanished, replaced by a dry, choking heat. The scent wasn't the faint exhaust from idling cruisers. It was the acrid, metallic tang of cordite and the sweet, sickening smell of burning insulation. The sound wasn't the murmur of tense officers. It was a deafening roar, the scream of twisting metal, the percussive thunder of concrete slabs shearing away from rebar, of the floor above, not as noise, but as a precise indicator of failing integrity. He knew with a certainty that was beyond calculation that the central stairwell would pancake in 90 seconds, that the fire would then rush through the void with the force of a tornado, seeking oxygen. This was how he worked, not with sensors, but with senses honed in the crucible of absolute catastrophe. He didn't analyze data, he absorbed the environment. The way a draft of superheated air moved past his cheek told him where the next flashover would occur. The subtle shift in the pitch of the building's moan told him which beam would give way first. It was a language of imminent collapse, and he was the only one in the world who could fluently speak it. The memory was a physical weight, a phantom pain of responsibility for lives he couldn't save and lives he did. It was the crushing burden of experience, of having seen the exact moment theory meets reality, and reality always wins. It was the profound loneliness of knowing something terrible with every fiber of your being, while those around you, with their clean uniforms and untested protocols, remained blissfully, fatally ignorant. The memory vanished as quickly as it came. The humid air of the bank siege rushed back into his lungs. The distant sirens replaced the screams. But the certainty remained. It was etched into his bones, this knowledge of how things break, how people break. He looked at the bank and he didn't see brick and mortar. He saw a sequence of failure waiting to unfold. He saw the precise minute the gunman's frayed nerves would snap. He saw the weak southeast corner giving way under the weight of an armored response. He saw it all, and the weight of that sight was absolute. The weight of the memory settled into a cold, clear focus. Eli Vance turned from the rookie, his gaze finding Chief Ramirez directly. He bypassed Miller entirely, speaking in that same low, resonant tone that carried an undeniable gravity. "Chief, you have 19 minutes, maybe 20. He didn't wait for a question. "The man by the east windows, the one your thermal shows pacing. He's not just agitated, he's claustrophobic. The air from that coal chute I mentioned is the only thing keeping his panic in check. The humidity is dropping, the breeze is shifting. It's immediately, but it will be the first thread pulled. The marble lintel over the door has a hairline fracture from the foundation shift. The concussion will widen it. You'll hear it crack. That's your signal. That's when their focus breaks, when they look at the door instead of the hostages. That is your 3-second window, not before and not after. After, the second gunman, the calm one by the vault, he'll use the distraction to move the hostages into the back room. And then you lose all visual. You lose any chance of a clean resolution." Officer Miller could only stare, his mouth slightly agape before he found his voice again. "This is insane. You're predicting human behavior based on the weather, on a crack in a door frame? This is guesswork, dangerous, reckless guesswork." "Chief, we have a certified negotiation team en route. SWAT is 15 minutes out. The protocol is to contain and wait. We have the technology to monitor this. We don't need folk wisdom." Chief Ramirez looked from Eli's weathered, certain face to Miller's flushed, indignant one. The command post was silent, every officer watching the silent battle between the map on the screen and the man who could read the earth itself. The chief's career had been built on procedure, on verified data, on the rule book. But her gut, the instinct that had kept her alive on the streets for 20 years, was screaming at her. This wasn't a guess, this was a verdict. She looked at the bank, then at her watch. 18 minutes. Protocol or the quiet man's certainty. The weight of every life in that building settled on her shoulders. The 17th minute ticked over. The tension in the command post was a live wire. Officer Miller stood rigidly by the thermal display, his arms crossed, his jaw set. He pointedly did not look at Eli, who remained a still, silent statue off to the side, his eyes closed as if listening to the very rotation of the planet. Chief Ramirez watched them both, her hand resting on her radio, her knuckles white. The 18th minute. Nothing. Miller allowed himself a small, tight breath, a flicker of vindication in his eyes. See? Hocus pocus. Then, on the thermal screen, the red blob by radio chatter exploded. Shot fired! Shot fired inside! No visual on hostiles! And then a second sound. Not a gunshot. A deep, grinding groan of stressed stone and metal coming from the front of the bank. Every head snapped toward the main entrance. A long, jagged crack appeared in the white marble lintel above the door, snaking its way through the carved lettering of the bank's name. A puff of ancient dust filtered down into the afternoon sun. Silence. Absolute stunned silence in the command post. The 3-second window was now open. Eli had been right about the time, about the shot, about the crack, about everything. The technology had recorded the events, but it had failed to predict them. It had shown a man pacing, a respiratory rate increasing. It had not understood the why. It had not seen the claustrophobia, the shifting breeze, the inevitable chain reaction of cause and effect. Miller stared at the cracked lintel, his face pale, his textbook worldview shattering as visibly as the marble. He had advocated for waiting. If they had waited, those 3 seconds would have been lost. The hostages would now be in the back room. The situation would have escalated beyond redemption. His technology had blindfolded him, while the quiet man had seen everything with his eyes closed. The crack in the marble lintel hung in the air, a silent testament to the quiet man's impossible foresight. The command post, once buzzing with protocol and radio chatter, had fallen into a hushed, stunned stillness. Officer Miller could only stare, the arrogance drained from his face, replaced by the pale shock of a man who has just watched the laws of his universe rewrite themselves before his eyes. Chief Ramirez broke the silence, her voice low, stripped of all official pretense. It was just a question, raw, with a need to understand the impossible. "Who are you?" The old man turned his head slowly. The intensity that had gripped him seemed to recede, leaving behind the same weary calm they had first seen. Eli Vance. He reached into the inner pocket of his worn jacket, not for a badge or an ID, but for a small faded piece of leather. It was an old key fob, the leather cracked and stained. He flipped it over, stamped into the locked on Eli, on the man, seeing him for the first time. Her voice was hushed, meant only for the few standing close, a recounting of a ghost story made real. "The Kingsley building," she said, the words barely audible. "The fire, 12 years ago. They said it was a structural collapse, a tragedy. The official report said no one could have known." She swallowed hard, her gaze dropping to the faded leather tab in his hand. The rumors, the stories the senior responders told, about a structural engineer who was first on scene. A civilian. He told the incident commander the West Wing would fail in 7 minutes. He told them exactly where the firefighters were trapped. He drew the rescue path in the dirt with his finger. They called him a madman. They wouldn't listen. She finally looked at Miller, her eyes fierce with the weight of the story. He went in alone, with a crowbar and a flashlight. They pulled 47 people out of a hole he tore through a collapsed firewall with his bare hands. He was the last one out. The building came down 60 seconds after they cleared the perimeter. They never found his name in any log. He just walked away. They called him Prophet, because he knew, he always knows. Her eyes returned to Eli, to the quiet, tired man who carried that impossible story in his pocket. "I thought you were a myth." The silence that followed was different now. It wasn't stunned, it was deferential. The legend had a face, and it was standing before them, waiting. Chief Ramirez straightened her posture, a formal, unconscious gesture of respect. "The window is open. What's the play?" All eyes were on Eli. The technology was forgotten. The rulebook was closed. Eli's plan was counterintuitive, a masterpiece of reading human nature instead of confronting it. "Tell your negotiator to get back on the horn. Don't talk about surrender. Don't talk about demands. Apologize." Miller blinked. "Apologize?" "For the air," Eli said, his voice calm, certain. The man who fired the shot, the claustrophobic one. His name is Michael, from the employee manifest. Tell him you're sorry. Tell him you've identified the issue with the ventilation and you're fixing it. Tell him you're redirecting a generator to power a fan at the coal saw blade. A long wrench. They'll feel for the bolt. They'll lift it. Slow. Quiet. The sound of the bolt sliding back will be masked by the generator noise from the street and the negotiator's voice in their ear. The door opens inward. The officer steps into the basement. Michael will be 10 feet away, his back turned, his ear pressed to the coal chute grate, waiting for a breeze that isn't coming. The plan was insane. It was quiet. It was precise. It relied on empathy, on understanding a man's deepest fear and using it not as a weapon, but as a key. There was no battering ram, no flashbang, no overwhelming force, just a whispered apology and a silent sliding bolt. Chief Ramirez didn't hesitate. She gave the orders. The negotiator's voice, calm and sincere, came over the speaker. "Michael, we hear you. We're sorry. We see the problem. We're on it." Down the alley, an officer, moving like a shadow, followed the silent instructions. The soft metallic scrape of the tool under the door. The faint, almost imperceptible click of the iron bolt lifting. The door eased open. It unfolded exactly as Prophet had said, every single step. Michael, desperate for the promised air, was crouched by the grate, his rifle leaning against the wall. The calm gunman in the main room was listening to the negotiator, his guard down for the first time. The officer from the alley stepped into the basement, his weapon aimed. "Police, don't move." The surrender was quiet, almost an anticlimax. The third gunman, isolated and confused, gave up minutes later. The hostages emerged, shaken but unharmed. The storm of a violent resolution had been reduced to a gentle, masterful rain. Officer Miller watched it all from the command post, his entire understanding of power and authority dismantled. He saw no medals on the man's jacket, no rank on his collar. He saw only the worn leather and the quiet certainty that had just undone a siege without a single shot being fired in anger. He saw true mastery, and it looked nothing like he had been taught. As the last hostage was embraced by their family and the media swarmed the celebrating officers, Eli Vance simply turned. He walked away from the flashing lights and the backslaps, a solitary figure merging with the gathering dusk.